Hello, Year 4. Well, in the chapter that you've just heard, we've heard some pretty upsetting things, haven't we? Pip's in the bear garden now, and people are betting on some bears that are fighting, and they're betting on which bear is going to die. Doesn't that seem awful? That's something people used to do in Tudor times. In chapter 22, the chapter I'm going to read to you, you're going to find out a little bit about where those bears have come from. Some of it's a little bit upsetting. Sorry about that. Chapter 22. 2 years earlier, that bear, the small skinny one, had been roaming happily through the forests of the desolate north. 4 of them travelled together, a mother and 3 cubs, padding across the carpet of pine needles, weaving between the trees. The father had long gone, leaving the mother to nurture her babies alone. Now the 3 cubs were a few months old, small and chubby. They had sleek fur, rounded ears, and sharp, inquisitive eyes. They played together, wrestling, rolling about, pushing and shoving, cuffing one another with their paws, always keeping their long claws sheathed. As the family moved through the forest, the mother raised her head every few moments, looking around, sniffing for food and checking for predators, always wary of potential threats. It was late summer. The sun was still warm, but the leaves were already turning brown. The bears were getting fat, although they weren't nearly as fat as they needed to be to hibernate. Over the next few weeks, they would have to eat almost constantly, absorbing protein, layering their bodies with the blubber that would keep them alive through the long winter snooze. Next year, they would wake in the spring and begin the whole process again. The bears rambled throughout the forests and the mountains, treating the land as their own personal empire, often travelling 10 or 20 miles in a day. They chomped herbs and mushrooms, plucked berries from the bushes, and scooped honey out of the hives, licked caterpillars from branches, and grabbed moths out of the air, snatched fish from the streams, chased squirrels up trees, and sprinted across the grass in pursuit of rabbits and deer. Bears were the biggest animal in the forest, and few predators dared attack them. But the cubs were vulnerable, having not yet learned how to defend themselves. A pack of wolves wouldn't attack a healthy adult bear, but they might try their luck with a cub, isolating him from the others, then overpowering him. The mother bear remained vigilant, keeping her eyes open and her ears raised at all times. Over the past few months, the mother bear had protected her cubs from all kinds of dangers, teaching them how to survive in the forest, but this time she wasn't cunning or careful enough. It was her last mistake. 5 hunters were hiding in the trees, big men armed with spears and axes, and as the bears approached, the hunters crowded round, yelling and screaming and raising their spears. The mother bear fought bravely, but she wasn't strong enough. If the cubs had been able to fight, they might have won, but the 3 of them huddled backwards, blinking and terrified, watching their mother being killed. The hunters camped near the scene of the slaughter. They skinned the mother's carcass, and that night they held a banquet. They built a fire and stuffed themselves on bear meat. The 3 cubs were tied to a tree within sight of the feast, hungry and confused, straining on the ropes. For the next few days, the men hunted in the woods, catching rabbits, trapping birds, and searching for more bears, but finding none. Each night they returned to the camp and feasted on bear. When they had eaten, they lolled around the cooling embers of the fire, and discussed what to do with the 3 cubs, whether to kill them or transport them back to the town. Bears were worth much more alive than dead. But would these 3 little cubs survive the journey? One of the hunters suggested killing the smallest one. "Oh, it wouldn't survive anyway," he said. "We can keep the skin, eat the meat, and save ourselves the bother of lugging another animal back to town." All but one of the others disagreed, preferring to take the risk. 3 against 2. The runt survived. When the hunters had collected 2 big bundles of skins, they loaded their horses, strapped down the bundles, and started on the long trek back. They tied ropes around the necks of the 3 bear cubs and dragged them behind the horses. The cubs stumbled through the forest, moaning piteously and missing their mother. 1 cub died on the journey. To the hunter's surprise, it wasn't the runt, but the biggest of the 3. They reached the town. In the market, an Englishman bought both bears, took them aboard his ship, and sailed for London. The Englishman was a merchant. He had filled most of his allotted space on the ship with furs, amber, timber, and salted fish. The 2 little bears, well, they were a bonus. With any luck, he thought, he should be able to sell them to an actor or a gypsy. The sailors had carried all kinds of strange cargo, but never a bear. They asked the Englishman to do some tricks with his bears. "Make them dance," begged the sailors. "Make them fight." But he refused. "Bears can't do tricks until they've been trained," he said, "and I don't know how to train them." On the voyage, a second bear cub died, driven mad by the seasickness perhaps, or he just starved. Only one was left then, the runt. In London, the ship moored at Rotherhithe. Traders hurried aboard. The sailors laid out their cargo on the deck. When the Englishman had sold most of his goods, he walked through the streets of Rotherhithe and Southwark, leading the cub on a rope, ignoring the stream of jokes and comments that followed them. He went to the bear garden, found the bearkeeper, and asked if he'd like to buy a new bear, freshly imported from the forests of the desolate north. "I'd love to buy another bear," said the bearkeeper, "but not that one." "Why not?" said the merchant. "Because that bear's too small. Who's going to pay an honest English penny to watch a bear like that fight?" A big bear, an aggressive bear, a bear that loved to fight, that might be worth £5, although you would sometimes be able to buy one for as little as 15 shillings. During the autumn, when the Russian ships docked in Rotherhithe once a week, you could pick up some pretty nice bears for £1 or 2. But a small, calm, quiet bear like this one, with its dribbly nose and its soft paws, was worthless. "Even if you fattened it up," said the bearkeeper, "its fur wouldn't make much more than a couple of hats." The bearkeeper offered a derisory price and allowed himself to be bargained up a little. The Englishman strolled back to his ship, jangling a few coins in his pocket. Better than nothing, he thought, but not much better. Next time he wouldn't waste his time or money on bears. When the Englishman had gone, the bearkeeper fetched his tools. He filed down the bear's teeth, flattening the sharp parts of the teeth. Then the paws. The left paw, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Having performed these procedures, the bearkeeper forced a metal hoop into one of the bear's nostrils. With a hoop through its nose, the bear had been tamed. And when the bearkeeper untied the ropes, the little bear didn't even try to escape or attack, meekly allowing itself to be ushered into a cage. Every day since then, the bear had sat inside that cage, staring at the wooden bars. In 2 years, The cub should have grown into a broad, muscular bear, afraid of nothing. Instead, fragile from a lack of food and exercise, the bear was small, skinny, and always nervous. Sorry about that. I told you that was a bit of a sad chapter, didn't I? So that's how the Bearkeeper came to have that little bear. Listen up for the next chapter. See how the little bear gets on.